One of the questions that I get most often from newcomers to the congregation is, what do Unitarian Universalists think about the Bible? I think this is partly a quick way of trying to categorize us, right? We seem like kinda Christian, but like kinda not. So what are we really? Now the trouble is, of course, that UUs resist being put into boxes, right? We like to think that we're kind of an out-of-the-box religion, and that each of us as individuals are kind of out-of-the-box people. We're not box people, right? And indeed, it is true that there are likely as many views on the Bible in this room as there are people. Maybe even more than there are people. But I actually love this question about the Bible because it is getting at something really important and central to who we are. And that is, where do we find wisdom? Now, naturally, the answer isn't straightforward because as Unitarian Universalists, we don't find wisdom in just one place, or even in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 places, right? We find wisdom everywhere. So, we see the Bible as a source of wisdom for sure, yes. But it's just one of many sources of wisdom all around us. There's not just one book or even one set of books. There's not just one person or even one set of people who hold that monopoly on wisdom. Even us, right? We don't hold the monopoly on wisdom. I love the way that the new section of the UUA bylaws that we adopted last year talks about our sources of wisdom. I'm going to read it for you. It says, direct experiences of transcending mystery and wonder are primary sources of Unitarian Universalist inspiration. These experiences open our hearts, renew our spirits, and transform our lives. We draw upon and are inspired by sacred, secular, and scientific understandings that help us make meaning and live into our values. These sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which these sources were created and are currently practiced. Grateful for the experiences that move us, aware of the religious ancestries we inherit, and enlivened by the diversity which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. Isn't that beautiful? Mm-hmm. Now, next week, we're going to talk more about the direct experience side of things, so you got to come back for that. But this week, I want to focus on the second part, the sacred, secular, and scientific understandings that help us to make meaning and to live into our values. Or as I might put it, the sources of wisdom outside ourselves that help us to live better and to understand our world more fully. Now, this can look like so many different things. We find wisdom in scripture and podcasts, in poetry and novels and books of all varieties, in music and movies, in theater and art, in history and science, and some days even in the news. Maybe not today, but some days, right? Now, with such a broad variety of sources, one might wonder, how do you discern where there is wisdom and where there is not? So saying wisdom is everywhere, right? Does that mean you can find wisdom in everything, in anything at all? Or are there things that aren't so wise after all? Now, I think this is an especially relevant question in this moment in our world, in this time of fake news and deep fakes, of algorithms and echo chambers, of leaders who don't necessarily put too much stock in the truth. There is so much content available in our world, right? We're just inundated with it all the time. So much that we could take in. There can't possibly be wisdom in all of it, right? This, I feel, is where we have to lean on our values and on our communities. Is a particular source pointing towards love or towards hate? Towards justice or injustice? Towards pluralism or towards the notion that there is just one truth? Saying that we can find wisdom from many sources is not the same as saying that all sources are wise or equally wise, right? And that discernment work is one of the challenges of Unitarian Universalism. And this is why it feels so important to me that we do some of that discernment together, or at least that we share our sources of wisdom with each other so that we can get another perspective on it. Sometimes I need someone else to gut check my reaction to a particular song or a particular article. Is this grounded in our values? Is it true? Is there wisdom to be found here? One of the things I love about how our worship associates work is that we are all about sharing our sources, various sources of wisdom with each other, and maybe doing some of that gut checking. We brainstorm about each of our themes, and inevitably, different sources come to light. A book or a song, a poem or a story, all these nuggets of wisdom that we each hold are gathered up in our meetings. I know that this process deepens my understanding of the theme and often makes me think about the theme in an entirely new way, kind of like what Kevin was talking about with our covenant groups as well, right? That it makes you think about it in a new way when you explore it with others, when you hear the sources of wisdom other people are bringing. And I always leave our worship associate meetings feeling a little bit wiser than when I walked in, right? And that's special. So that's what I want us to do today. That's what we're going to do today. I want to gather up some of those nuggets of wisdom, at least the sources of them, that inspire and guide you. Later, I'm going to have you actually write on the note card that you got when you came in today, one source of wisdom that you would love someone else to know about. One concrete book or movie or song or podcast or poem or idea or like scientific theory or, whatever it is. As long as it's something that someone else could find, right? So you can't say something like, my dog, because someone else can't go like, look up your dog. Not that your dog isn't a source of wisdom, just to be clear, but we're going to talk about that next week. But to give you some inspiration for this, if your mind is totally blank when I give you that prompt, Erin and Brenna and I are going to share some of the sources of wisdom we draw from to give you some examples. And one of the sources of wisdom that I have especially appreciated over the last few years are novels. I was a voracious reader as a kid, but to be honest, 7 years of college and grad school and way too many part-time jobs left me with little time to read for fun. I got out of the habit of reading for fun, and then I had kids, and I got even more out of the habit of reading for fun. All I would read were like dry nonfiction books that I thought might help me write sermons, and that I often didn't finish. Let's be really honest, I almost never finished them. I read just enough to write the sermon. So when I took my sabbatical a few years ago, I decided that I was going to try to get more back in the habit of reading for fun. And part of that meant acknowledging that I really prefer to listen to audiobooks rather than actually reading. That's the way I take it in best. Now, I felt a little bit guilty about reading novels while on sabbatical because some of my colleagues like to share the big stacks of nonfiction books that they read during their study time. And I thought maybe I'm supposed to be reading books that are going to help my ministry during this time. But I did it anyway. And along the way, I realized that novels are pretty preachable too, right? That my favorite kind of novel is actually one that tells a compelling story, but also explores the big questions of life. I read a series of sci-fi books that asked really interesting questions about artificial intelligence and what it means to be human. I read a book called The Measure, which I actually have preached about, which explored questions about life and death and how to make life meaningful. And just last month, I read a book called The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue that explored the ideas of memory and legacy and what it means to leave your mark on the world. Sometimes I do read novels that are total fluff. Those are the ones I won't tell you about. But more often, I find something in the stories that makes me think about the world differently or more deeply than I have before. It helps me to understand other people better and to make meaning out of what we are living through right now. Turns out, fiction can be just as full of wisdom as anything else.